I remember the sound of machines breathing in the dark. It was October 2023, and I woke to the fluorescent hush of St. Bridget's intensive care unit in Madison. The hour when monitors make more sound than people. My daughter, Hannah, was at my left side, her thumb resting on the blue pulse oximeter taped the way she used to smooth my hair before school concerts. I could smell coffee on her breath. She set her phone face down on the tray table, screen dimmed to almost nothing. I had pneumonia. My oxygen was low. The doctors were kind but careful with their numbers. Later that week, the hospital chaplain stopped by and mentioned something about 2 witnesses for certain forms, and something in me filed that away. Families talk softly in intensive care units. Papers move more softly still. I didn't fight the air or the fear. I watched the hands of the clock. And I watched my daughter's other hand, the one that wasn't holding mine. Because while she held my left hand, her right hand hovered near a thin manila folder balanced on the windowsill. She was careful not to lay it on the rolling table. Too visible. That was the afternoon I started to notice. The afternoon when something small shifted, like a table leg shortening by a centimeter. Barely visible. But everything wobbles after that. What I didn't know then was that by the time I left that hospital, my house would no longer be mine. At least, not on paper. Not according to a deed that bore my name, but not my loop. Not according to a trust I'd never heard of and a notary I'd never met. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you who I was before the machines, before the folder, before the hand that held mine learned to sign away everything I'd built. Marian Ellison, though most people called her Mary, was 58 years old the autumn her daughter tried to take her house. She had been a payroll coordinator for 32 years, retiring 3 years earlier with a pension that paid her bills and left a little for the garden and the cat. She lived alone in a small 2-bedroom house on the east side of Madison, the kind of place with oak floors that creaked near the bathroom and a kitchen window that faced a neighbor's maple tree. The house had been purchased in 1996, when Mary was 31 years old and newly married to Tom Ellison. They'd saved for 3 years for the down payment, both of them working extra shifts and skipping vacations. The mortgage had been paid off in 2014, 6 years before Tom died. Mary remembered the day the final payment cleared. She'd printed the confirmation page and filed it in a green folder labeled "Mortgage, Paid in Full." Tom had opened a bottle of wine that evening, something cheap from the grocery store, and they'd toasted in the backyard while the sun set behind the neighbor's garage. It wasn't glamorous. It was just theirs. The house itself was unremarkable. Built in 1963, it had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a galley kitchen, and a living room with a brick fireplace that hadn't worked since 2008. The basement was damp but functional. The attic was cramped and full of boxes Mary kept meaning to sort through. The backyard was small, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet, with a patch of grass and a garden bed where Mary grew tomatoes and basil every summer. The front porch had 3 steps, and the railing wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. It wasn't much. But it was hers. Her husband, Tom, had died 10 years earlier. Heart attack at 53. One minute he was raking leaves in the yard. The next minute he was on the ground, and Mary was on the phone with 911, her voice steady even though her hands weren't. The funeral had been small. The grief had been large. But Mary was the kind of woman who carried things quietly. She didn't talk about loss. She folded it into her days and kept going. After Tom died, Mary had lived alone. She'd considered moving into something smaller, maybe an apartment or a condo, but the idea of leaving the house felt wrong. Tom was in the walls. His coffee mug was still in the cupboard. His handwriting was still on the calendar from 2014, marking the day they'd paid off the mortgage. She couldn't leave that behind. So she stayed. She kept working until 2020, when the company offered an early retirement package. By then, Mary was 55 years old and tired. Tired of the fluorescent lights and the cubicle walls and the spreadsheets that never seemed to balance correctly. She took the package. She started collecting her pension. She lived carefully, frugally, the way she'd always lived. Her pension was $1,372 per month. Social Security added another $912. She had $17,000 in a savings account and a small IRA worth $34,000. It wasn't wealth, but it was enough. Her property taxes were $1,800 per year. Her utilities averaged $120 per month. Her groceries cost $250 per month. She didn't have a car payment. She didn't have credit card debt. She lived within her means, and she slept well because of it. She had one daughter, Hannah, 40 years old, married to a man named Derek Klein, 2 children, a boy, 10, and a girl, 7. Hannah was a dental hygienist at a clinic across town. She made decent money, around $52,000 per year, and Derek worked in insurance sales. They lived in a larger house in a newer subdivision, the kind of place with an HOA and rules about lawn height and fence colors. Mary had been there twice. It was nice. It was clean. It felt like a showroom. Mary and Hannah talked on the phone twice a week, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They had Sunday lunches once a month, alternating between Mary's house and Hannah's. It wasn't a close relationship, but it wasn't a distant one either. It was the kind of relationship where you assume love without testing it too often. They didn't argue. They didn't dig into old wounds. They kept things surface level and polite. Hannah had always been independent. Even as a child, she'd preferred to solve problems herself rather than ask for help. She'd been a good student, responsible and organized. She'd graduated from high school with honors, gone to technical college for dental hygiene, married at 26, had her first child at 30. Everything had been planned. Everything had been orderly. Mary had been proud of her. Still was, in a way. But there had always been something between them. Not hostility. Not distance. Just a gap. A space where deeper understanding might have lived if either of them had known how to cross it. Mary didn't think about that gap much. She accepted it the way she accepted the wobble in the porch railing and the broken fireplace. Some things don't get fixed. Some things just are. And Mary liked her life the way it was. She liked her quiet routines. She liked knowing where her mail key was, where her checkbook lived, where her will sat in the filing cabinet under the window. She was a woman who believed in having things in order, in writing things down, in keeping her records. That belief would save her. But first, it would be tested in ways she hadn't imagined. The pneumonia started the first week of October. A cold that wouldn't quit. A cough that dragged. Mary thought it was nothing. She drank tea with honey. She stayed home. She watched the leaves turn. The neighbor's maple tree went from green to yellow to a deep, brilliant red. Mary stood at the kitchen sink every morning and watched the color deepen. Tom used to say that tree had the best red in the whole block. Mary agreed. But by the second week, breathing felt like work. By the 10th, her sister Joan was driving her to the emergency room. Joan Mercer was 56 years old, 2 years younger than Mary, and worked as a librarian at the main branch downtown. She'd been divorced for 8 years and lived alone in a small apartment near the university. She was practical and discreet, the kind of person who showed up when you needed her and didn't ask questions you weren't ready to answer. Joan had called Mary on the evening of October 9th. "You sound terrible," she'd said. "It's just a cold." "How long have you had it?" "A week. Maybe 10 days. Are you coughing?" "Yes." "Are you short of breath?" Mary had paused. She'd been sitting on the couch, and just walking from the kitchen had made her chest tight. "A little." "I'm coming over." "You don't need to." "I'm coming over." Joan had arrived 20 minutes later. She'd listened to Mary breathe, watched her struggle to finish a sentence without gasping, and said, "We're going to the emergency room. It's just a cold. It's pneumonia. Let's go." Mary didn't argue. She could barely finish a sentence. They admitted her that night. Chest X-ray showed infiltrates in both lungs. Oxygen saturation was 86%. The emergency room doctor was young, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a calm voice. He explained that Mary's lungs were inflamed and filling with fluid. The infection was bacterial, probably pneumococcal. They'd start antibiotics immediately. They'd give her supplemental oxygen. They'd monitor her closely. "Will I need to stay?" Mary had asked. "Yes. At least a few days. Maybe longer." They moved her to a regular medical floor that first night. But by morning, her oxygen levels had dropped to 82% despite the supplemental oxygen. The nurse called the doctor. The doctor ordered a transfer to the intensive care unit. Mary didn't protest. She felt too tired to protest. She let them wheel her bed down the hallway, through double doors, into a room that smelled like disinfectant and sounded like machines. They hooked her up to monitors. They adjusted the oxygen flow. They started a new 4. They told her to rest. Joan stayed until visiting hours ended at 8 p.m. She sat in the chair beside the bed and didn't talk much. She just sat. Mary was grateful for that. For the silence. For the presence without pressure. Before Joan left, she leaned over and said, "I'll call Hannah." Mary nodded. "Okay." Joan squeezed her hand. "I'll be back tomorrow." Mary closed her eyes. The machines beeped. The air hissed through the oxygen tube. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. Mary drifted in and out of sleep. When she woke, it was dark. The fluorescent lights were dimmed. A nurse came in and checked her vitals. Asked if she needed anything. Mary shook her head. The nurse left. Mary stared at the ceiling. She thought about the house. About the cat, who was staying with Joan for now. About the mail piling up on the counter. About the tomatoes in the garden, probably rotting on the vine. She thought about Tom. About the way he used to say, "You're stronger than you think." She wondered if that was still true. Hannah arrived the next afternoon, October 11th. She came with a canvas bag full of magazines Mary wouldn't read and a phone charger Mary didn't need. She wore jeans and a blue sweater and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired. She looked worried. She sat beside the bed and took Mary's hand. "I'm here, Mom," she said. Mary nodded. Her throat was dry. Her head felt heavy. The room was bright and cold and full of the smell of antiseptic and recycled air. Hannah stayed until evening. She spoke to the nurses. She asked about medication schedules and oxygen settings and when the doctor would make rounds. She kept her phone in her lap, screen dimmed, checking it every few minutes. Mary noticed the dimness. She noticed the way Hannah angled her body slightly when she scrolled. She noticed the way Hannah kept the canvas bag on the chair instead of the floor, as if she didn't want anyone looking inside. But Mary said nothing. In hospitals, you learn that silence carries more than questions. That evening, after Hannah left, a respiratory therapist came in and adjusted Mary's oxygen. She asked Mary to take a deep breath. Mary tried. It felt like breathing through a straw. "You're working hard," the therapist said. "That's okay. Let the oxygen do the work." Mary nodded. She closed her eyes. She listened to the machines. She counted the beeps. 1, 2, 3, 4. She fell asleep somewhere around 27. The next morning, October 12th, the doctor made rounds. He was a different doctor than the one in the emergency room. Older, maybe 50, with gray hair and bifocals. He introduced himself as Dr. Ramos. He looked at Mary's chart. He listened to her lungs with a stethoscope. He asked her to rate her breathing on a scale of 1 to 10. 6, Mary said. Maybe 7. Better than yesterday. A little. He nodded. The antibiotics are working. But you'll need to stay a few more days. Maybe longer. We need to make sure the infection clears. Mary nodded. She didn't ask when she could go home. She didn't have the energy. Dr. Ramos left. A nurse came in and took blood. Another nurse brought breakfast, oatmeal, toast, orange juice. Mary ate half the oatmeal. She drank the juice. She left the toast. Joan arrived at 10 a.m. She brought a book she thought Mary might like and a small vase with flowers from her apartment. She set the vase on the windowsill. She pulled the chair close to the bed. Saturday. "How are you feeling?" Joan asked. "Tired. That's the infection. And the medication." Mary nodded. "How's the cat?" Federal grumpy. Knocked over a plant. Mary smiled slightly. "Sounds right." Joan reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. She set them on the tray table beside the bed. "In case you need to write something down," Joan said. "Questions for the doctor. Things you need me to bring." Mary looked at the notebook. It was plain, spiral-bound, with a blue cover. The pen was black, the kind you get for free at banks. "Thank you," Mary said. Joan stayed until noon. Then she said she had to get back to work. She kissed Mary's forehead and left. Mary stared at the notebook. She didn't open it. Not yet. But she thought about it. About the habit of writing things down. About keeping records. About the way a list could make chaos feel manageable. She'd always been that way. Even as a child. She'd kept a diary, not about feelings or secrets, but about facts. What time she woke up. What she ate for breakfast. How much homework she had. It had made her feel in control when nothing else did. She closed her eyes. She thought about the house. About the filing cabinet under the window. About the green folder labeled "Mortgage Paid in Full." She thought about the importance of keeping things in order. Then she fell asleep. On the third day, October 14th, the chaplain stopped by. Her name was Rose Lynn. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair and a voice like chamomile tea. She wore a simple gray dress and a silver cross on a chain around her neck. She knocked softly on the door and asked if she could come in. Mary nodded. Rose pulled the chair close. She didn't sit in it. She just stood beside it and asked Mary how she was feeling. "Better," Mary said. "A little. That's good. The nurses say you're doing well." Mary didn't respond. Rose looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "I'm here if you need anything. Prayer. Conversation. Practical help." "I'm okay." Rose nodded. She glanced at the tray table. At the notebook Joan had left. It's good to write things down. Questions. Concerns. Wishes. Mary looked at her. "Wishes? For your care. For your future." Rose paused. "If you need help with any end-of-life paperwork, I can arrange for someone to assist. Living wills, directives, that sort of thing. We just need 2 witnesses, if you'd like to formalize anything." Mary's chest tightened, though not from the pneumonia. "I'm not at the end of anything," she said. Rose smiled. "Of course not. I just like to make sure people know their options." "I know my options." "Good." Rose stayed a few more minutes. She asked about Mary's family. Mary said she had a daughter and a sister. Rose asked if they were visiting. Mary said yes. Rose nodded. Then she said a short prayer, something about strength and healing, and left. After she left, Mary lay still and stared at the ceiling tiles. 2 witnesses. The phrase sat in her mind like a stone in her shoe. She didn't know why it bothered her. It was a reasonable thing for a chaplain to say. People in hospitals do think about end-of-life issues. Living wills. Advance directives. Powers of attorney. Mary already had those things. She'd done them 10 years ago after Tom died. She'd named Hannah as her agent under a durable power of attorney. She'd named Joan as her backup. She'd signed a living will stating that she didn't want extraordinary measures if she were terminally ill. But that was different from a deed. That was different from property. Mary picked up the notebook from the tray table. She opened it to the first page. She wrote, October 14th. The chaplain mentioned 2 witnesses for paperwork. Then she closed the notebook and set it back down. She told herself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. Just a standard conversation. But the phrase stayed with her. That afternoon, during the doctor's rounds, a social worker came by. She was in her 50s, with efficient hands and a clipboard. She wore a hospital ID badge that said Linda Vasquez, MSW. She introduced herself and asked if Mary had any concerns about discharge planning. "Discharge," Mary said. "I just got here." Linda smiled. "I know. But we like to plan ahead. Make sure you have support at home. Make sure you have the resources you need." "I'll be fine." Linda made a note on her clipboard. Then she pulled a pamphlet from a folder and handed it to Mary. "This is information about advance directives. Living wills. Powers of attorney. It's good to have these things in place. Just in case." Mary took the pamphlet. Her hand shook. The tremor had started the day before, something about the antibiotics and the lack of sleep and the effort it took just to breathe. She managed to hold the pamphlet, but her fingers didn't feel steady. "I already have those," Mary said. "That's great. A lot of people don't." Linda glanced at the clipboard again. "One more thing. If you have any property issues, deeds, titles, that sort of thing, those are best handled outside the hospital setting, with proper legal counsel. Mary looked at her. Property issues? Just a general recommendation. Sometimes people want to make sure things are in order. Transfer property to family members. Set up trusts. That kind of thing. I don't need to do that. Of course not. Just make sure you're aware of your options. Linda smiled again. Then she left. Mary stared at the pamphlet. It was glossy and trifold, with a photo of an older couple smiling on the front. The title said, Planning for Your Future, A Guide to Advanced Directives. Hannah was sitting in the chair by the window. She'd arrived an hour earlier and had been scrolling on her phone. Now she looked up. What's that? Hannah asked. A pamphlet. About advanced directives. Hannah stood and walked over. She reached for the pamphlet. Mary handed it to her. Her hand shook. Hannah looked at the pamphlet. Then she folded it in half without reading it. I'll bring it back later, Hannah said. You need to rest. Leave it on the table, Mary said. Hannah smiled. I'll bring it back. She slipped it into her canvas bag. By evening, Mary had forgotten to ask for it again. By the next morning, she didn't bother. But she remembered the fold. The quickness. The way Hannah had tucked it out of sight before Mary could even read the first line. Mary opened the notebook again. She wrote, October 14th. A social worker gave me a pamphlet. Hannah took it. Said she'd bring it back. Then she closed the notebook and set it on the table. The machines beeped. The air hissed. Mary closed her eyes. 2 witnesses. The phrase wouldn't leave her alone. October 15th. Mid-afternoon. The light through the window was thin and gray. Joan had stepped out to talk to a nurse about the antibiotic drip. Something about the foresight looking red and possibly needing to be moved. She'd been gone maybe 15 minutes. Hannah sat beside the bed, her left hand resting on Mary's. I'm here, Mom, she said again, like a refrain. Her right hand hovered near the windowsill. The manila folder was there, balanced on the narrow ledge. Mary had noticed it the day before. She'd assumed it was something benign. Medical papers. Insurance forms. Something Hannah was handling for her. But now, watching more closely, Mary noticed the way Hannah glanced toward the door. The way she checked her phone. The way the screen was so dim Mary could barely see it glow. Hannah typed something quickly, one-handed. Then she set the phone down. Mary's eyes were half-closed. She was tired. The oxygen made her drowsy. But she wasn't asleep. She was aware of the small sounds, the click of a pen cap, the rustle of paper, the soft scrape of Hannah shifting the folder slightly, as if testing whether it would stay balanced. Hannah's phone buzzed. She picked it up, read something, typed a reply. Her face stayed neutral. Then she glanced at the door again and leaned forward slightly, as if listening for footsteps in the hall. Mary watched. She didn't say anything. She just watched. A few minutes later, Hannah stood and stepped into the hallway. Mary could hear her voice, low and steady, though she couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a phone call. Or maybe a conversation with someone just outside the door. When Hannah returned, she was carrying a small paper cup of water. She set it on the tray table and adjusted the folder on the windowsill so it sat farther back, less visible from the door. Drink a little, Hannah said. Mary took the cup. Her hand shook. Water sloshed onto the sheet. Hannah studied her wrist. It's okay. Mary drank. The water was lukewarm. She handed the cup back. Hannah stayed another hour. She scrolled on her phone. She spoke to a nurse about discharge planning, though Mary wasn't being discharged yet. The nurse said it would probably be another 3 or 4 days, depending on how Mary's oxygen levels stabilized. Hannah nodded. She checked the time twice. Then she kissed her mother's forehead and said she'd be back tomorrow. After she left, Mary lay still and thought about the folder. About the phone. About the way her daughter had blocked the sightline from the hallway as if she were protecting something. Mary didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just filed it away, the way she used to file receipts and timesheets back when she worked payroll. She made a mental note. She marked the date. She waited. By evening, the machines beeped their steady rhythm. Mary closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep deeply. She kept waking, listening to footsteps in the hall, wondering who was outside and what they were carrying. She thought about the pamphlet, about the chaplain's words, about the social worker's mention of property issues. She thought about Tom, about the way he used to say, "Trust, but verify." Mary opened her eyes. She reached for the notebook on the tray table. She opened it to the second page. She wrote, October 15th. Hannah here this afternoon. Folder on windowsill. Phone screen is very dim. Stepped into the hallway for several minutes. Spoke to someone, couldn't hear who. Then she closed the notebook and set it back down. The next morning, a phlebotomist came to draw blood. She was young, maybe 25, with bright pink scrubs and a cheerful voice. She tied the tourniquet around Mary's arm and asked her to make a fist. "You're doing great," the phlebotomist said. Mary watched as the vial filled with dark red blood. The phlebotomist untied the tourniquet, pressed a cotton ball to the puncture site, and taped it down. "I just need you to sign the consent form," she said, handing Mary a clipboard. Mary picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. She had to brace her wrist with her other hand just to keep the pen steady enough to sign her name. "Sorry," Mary said. The phlebotomist smiled. "No problem. Happens all the time." But Mary looked at the signature. The letters were shaky. The loop in the R of her last name, Ellison, was barely there. She always made that loop. Always. It was a habit from 30 years of signing payroll checks and tax forms and mortgage papers. The loop was part of her signature. She stared at the form. Then she handed it back. The phlebotomist left. Mary lay back and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the loop. About the way her hand had shaken. About the fact that if she tried to sign something important right now, it wouldn't look like her signature. Not exactly. That afternoon, Hannah returned. She brought soup in a thermos and a paperback mystery Mary had read years ago. They didn't talk much. Hannah asked about the cough. Mary said it was better. Hannah asked about the oxygen levels. Mary said they were improving. Hannah nodded and checked her phone. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But Mary had started keeping a list in her head. The chaplain's words. The social worker's pamphlet. The folder on the sill. The dimmed screen. The pen that shook. The loop that barely closed. Small things. Quiet things. Things that didn't mean anything on their own. But together, they made a shape. And the shape looked like something Mary didn't want to name yet. So she waited. She breathed. She watched the clock. She watched her daughter's other hand. October 16th. Morning. Mary woke to find a nurse adjusting her fore. The site on her left hand had become red and swollen, so they were moving it to her right hand. The nurse was patient and gentle, but it still hurt. "Sorry," the nurse said. "This'll just take a minute." Mary nodded. She watched as the nurse inserted a new forecatheter into a vein on the back of her right hand. Taped it down. Connected the tubing. Adjusted the drip rate. "All set," the nurse said. After the nurse left, Mary looked at her right hand. The foresight was covered with clear tape and a small gauze pad. Her hand felt heavy. Foreign. She thought about signing her name with this hand. With the fore pulling at her skin. With the tremor that came and went depending on how tired she was. She thought about the loop. She picked up the notebook and wrote with her left hand, October 16th. I moved to my right hand. Writing with my left hand now. The signature would look different. Then she set the notebook down. Joan arrived at 10:30 a.m. She brought fresh clothes for Mary: sweatpants, a t-shirt, a cardigan, in case she was discharged soon. She also brought mail from Mary's house. A few bills. A grocery store circular. A postcard from a dentist reminding Mary about a cleaning appointment. I'll reschedule that, Joan said, looking at the postcard. Thank you. Joan set the mail on the tray table. She sat down in the chair. She looked at Mary. You look better, Joan said. I feel better. Good. They sat in silence for a while. Then Joan said, Hannah called me last night. Asked if I thought you were doing okay. Mary looked at her. What did you say? I said you were improving. That the doctors were pleased. Mary nodded. Joan leaned forward. Is everything okay between you two? Why do you ask? I don't know. She sounded stressed. Mary didn't respond. She just looked at the notebook on the table. Joan followed her gaze. Have you been writing things down? A little. That's good. It helps to keep track. Mary nodded. She didn't elaborate. Joan didn't push. They sat together for another hour. Joan read a book. Mary dozed. At noon, Joan stood and said she needed to get back to work. I'll check on the cat tonight, Joan said. Thank you. Joan squeezed Mary's hand. Call if you need me. After Joan left, Mary picked up the notebook. She flipped through the pages. 3 entries so far. Short. Factual. Nothing dramatic. But already, the notebook felt like something important. Like a record. Like proof. Mary added one more line. October 16th. Joan visited. Asked if things were okay with Hannah. I didn't answer. Then she closed the notebook and hid it under the blanket on her lap. Mary was discharged on October 22nd. 8 days in the hospital. Her oxygen levels had stabilized at 94% on room air. The antibiotics had done their job. She still had a cough, but it was manageable. The doctor handed her a sheet of instructions and a prescription for an inhaler. He told her to follow up with her primary care doctor in 1 week. He told her to rest. He told her not to overdo it. Joan drove her home. The house smelled like dust and closed windows. Mary walked slowly from the car to the front door. Her legs felt weak. Her chest ached. Joan helped her inside, set a grocery bag on the counter, and made tea. The cat appeared from the bedroom, meowed loudly, and rubbed against Mary's legs. He missed you, Joan said. I missed him. Mary sat at the kitchen table and looked around. Everything was where she'd left it. The mail was stacked on the counter. The cat was asleep on the couch within 10 minutes. The light through the window was pale and cool. Hannah called that evening. She said she'd stop by in the morning to help with groceries and pick up prescriptions. Mary said that was fine. They hung up. Joan made scrambled eggs for dinner. They ate in silence. Then Joan went to the guest room, and Mary went to her own bed. She lay under the covers and stared at the ceiling. Her chest felt tight, but not from pneumonia. From something else. Something she still couldn't name. She thought about the hospital. About the folder on the windowsill. About the dimmed phone. About the pen that shook. She thought about the loop. Then she fell asleep. The next morning, Hannah arrived with a reusable shopping bag and a cheerful voice. Good morning, Mom. You look so much better. Mary was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking tea. She'd been up since 6 a.m. She'd fed the cat. She'd opened the mail Joan had brought. Bills, mostly. She'd stacked them neatly. Hannah set the shopping bag on the counter. I brought some soup. And bread. And I'll pick up your prescriptions today. Thank you. Hannah looked at the mail on the counter. Do you want me to take care of these? No. Mom, you just got home. Let me help. I can handle my own mail. Hannah smiled. I know you can. But you shouldn't have to right now. She picked up the stack of envelopes and slipped them into her bag. I'll sort through it and bring back anything important. Mary watched her. I want my mail. You'll get it. I'll just make sure the bills are paid on time. I've been paying my bills for 40 years. I know. But you were just in the hospital. Let me take some of the stress off. Hannah zipped the bag. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse and wrote something down. I'm redirecting a few bills to my address, Hannah said. Just for a week or 2. So you don't have to worry about due dates. I'll set up autopay for you. Mary's joy tightened. I don't want autopay. It'll make things easier. I said no. Hannah paused. She looked at her mother. Then she smiled again, softer this time. Okay, we'll talk about it later. She left with the mail. Mary sat at the table and stared at the empty counter where the envelopes had been. She felt something twist in her chest. Not panic. Not yet. Just the first turn of a screw she hadn't known was there. She stood slowly and walked to the kitchen drawer. She pulled out a pen and a notepad. She wrote, October 23rd. Hannah took mail. Said she'd redirect bills to her address for a week or 2. I want to set up autopay. I said no. Then she tore off the page and folded it. She opened the cupboard above the stove and pulled down the sugar canister. She lifted the lid and tucked the folded note inside, behind the bag of sugar. She didn't know why she was hiding it. She just felt the need to keep a record, to mark the shift, to prove to herself that she wasn't imagining things. Over the next 2 weeks, small things continued to shift. On October 26th, Hannah came by again. She brought soup and groceries and a new Wi-Fi router in a cardboard box. "Your internet has been so slow," Hannah said. "I thought I'd upgrade it for you." Mary was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. The cat was on her lap. "It's fine. Mom, it takes forever to load a page. This one's faster. And more secure." Hannah didn't wait for permission. She unplugged the old router from the wall and started setting up the new one. It took about 15 minutes. When she was done, she handed Mary a slip of paper. "Here's the new network name and password." Mary looked at the paper. The network name was Ellison_home_2. The password was a random string of letters and numbers. "Why did it need to change?" Mary asked. "Better security. I'll text you the password too, in case you lose the paper." Mary folded the slip and set it on the coffee table. "Text it now." Hannah picked up her phone. "I will. I just need to finish a couple things first." She didn't text it that day. Or the next day. On October 29th, Mary called Hannah and asked for the password again. "I need to check my email," Mary said. "I'll send it tonight," Hannah said. She didn't. On November 1st, Mary added another line to her notepad, October 26th. The router changed. Password given on paper, not texted. October 29th. Asked for password again. Not sent. She tore off the page and added it to the sugar canister. On November 2nd, Mary noticed something else. Hannah had started referring to Mary's house as the place. "How's the place?" Hannah had asked on the phone. "Not your home, not your house, the place." Mary wrote it down. She folded the note. She added it to the canister. By early November, the canister was starting to fill with folded slips of paper. Mary told herself she was being paranoid, that she was reading too much into things, that Hannah was just trying to help. But the notes kept accumulating. On November 7th, Hannah stopped by with groceries again. At the checkout, she'd used Mary's loyalty card but paid with her own credit card. Mary noticed when they got home and Hannah unpacked the bags. "You didn't need to pay," Mary said. "It's fine. I'll reimburse you." Hannah waved her hand. "Don't worry about it." Mary watched as Hannah folded the receipt and slipped it into her pocket instead of leaving it on the counter the way she used to. "Can I see the receipt?" Mary asked. Hannah paused. "Why?" "I like to keep track." "Mom, it's just groceries." "I'd like to see it." Hannah pulled the receipt from her pocket and handed it over. Mary scanned the items. Bread, milk, eggs, soup, chicken, rice. Everything is reasonable. Nothing strange. She handed it back. Hannah folded it again and put it back in her pocket. "I'll keep it for my records," she said. Mary didn't reply. She just added another note to the canister that night, November 7th. "Receipt kept, not left. Paid with her card, used my loyalty number." By mid-November, Mary had started waking at 5 a.m. not because of the cough. The cough was better. She woke up because her mind wouldn't rest. Because the list in the canister was getting longer. Because the small shifts had started to feel like a pattern. She would sit at the kitchen table in the dark, drinking tea, writing things down. Dates. Times. Phrases. Nothing dramatic. Just the record of someone learning to stand again. Someone learned to see what was happening around her. On November 10th, Mary went to the bank. She needed to deposit a check from her pension. While she was there, she asked for a copy of her recent statements. The teller printed them. Mary took them home and reviewed them carefully. Everything looked normal. Deposits. Withdrawals. Nothing unusual. But Mary noticed something. Her mailing address on the account had been changed. It now listed Hannah's address, not Mary's. Mary's chest tightened. She hadn't authorized that change. She picked up the phone and called the bank. "This is Marian Ellison. I need to change my mailing address back to my home address." The customer service representative was polite. "Of course. Can you verify your account number?" Mary gave it. "And your current address." Mary gave her address. Okay, I've updated that. The change was made on October 24th. Do you recall authorizing that? No. It looks like the request came in over the phone. The caller verified your account number and the last 4 digits of your social security number. Mary closed her eyes. Hannah had that information. She'd helped Mary with paperwork years ago, after Tom died. Change it back, Mary said. Already done. Is there anything else I can help you with? No. Thank you. Mary hung up. She sat at the table and stared at the phone. Then she wrote another note. November 10th. The bank mailing address changed to Hannah's address on October 24th. Changed back today. Request came over phone, caller verified SSN. She added the note to the canister. Then she sat very still and thought about what was happening. On November 12th, Hannah called and said she had to run an errand. She'd stop by later that afternoon. Mary said that was fine. After they hung up, Mary sat at the table and thought. Hannah usually came over on Tuesdays and Fridays. Today was a Sunday, and Hannah had said she'd stop by, not that she was coming to help with anything specific. Mary looked at the clock. It was 10:30 a.m. If Hannah was running an errand, she'd probably be gone for at least an hour. Mary stood and walked to the bathroom. She opened the drawer where Hannah had organized her pill bottles into a color-coded system. Blue for morning, white for evening, yellow for as needed. It was thoughtful. It was helpful. It made Mary feel cared for. And controlled. She stared at the neat rows of pills. Then she pulled out the blue tray for Tuesday. Under it, folded in half, was a piece of paper. Mary's heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She just lifted the paper carefully and unfolded it. It was a carbon copy. Faint purple ink on thin paper, the kind that comes from those duplicate forms. At the top, in small print, it said, "Quitclaim deed." Mary sat down on the edge of the bathtub. She held the paper steady and read. Grantor, Marion E. Ellison. Grantee, the Ellison Family Trust, managed by Hannah Klein. Date, October 15th, 2023. Mary stared at the date. October 15th. That was the day Joan had stepped out to talk to the nurse. The day Hannah had sat beside the bed with a manila folder on the windowsill. The day Hannah had held her mother's hand and typed on her dimmed phone screen with the other. Mary kept reading. The deed described the property, 742 East Mifflin Street, Madison, Wisconsin. Her house. The small 2-bedroom on the east side. The place she'd lived for 23 years. The place her husband had died raking leaves. The place where she'd raised Hannah. The place that was hers. Or had been. She turned the paper over. At the bottom were 2 witness signatures. One name, J. Morrison. The other, D. Lane. And a notary seal. Faint, but legible. A name, Daniel Lane. A commission number. A county, Dane. Mary looked at the grantor signature line. Her name, Marion E. Ellison. The signature looked like hers. Almost. The slant was right. The size was right. But the R in Ellison, the loop she always made, the loop that had been part of her signature for 30 years, was missing. Not incomplete. Missing. Mary set the paper on her lap and sat very still. Then she reached for her purse on the bathroom counter and pulled out her driver's license. She looked at the signature on the license. The loop was there. Bold. Clear. She pulled out her checkbook from the drawer. She flipped to the register. Every signature had the loop. She looked back at the carbon copy. No loop. Mary stood. She walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer under the phone. She pulled out the old cell phone she kept for emergencies. It didn't have a data plan. It didn't connect to the internet. It was just a phone. A backup. Something she'd bought years ago and kept charged in case her main phone died. She turned it on. The screen lit up. The battery was at 73%. She opened the camera and walked back to the bathroom. She photographed the deed. Front and back. Close-up of the signature. Close-up of the notary seal. Close-up of the date. Close-up of the witness names. Then she turned the phone off and carried it to the kitchen. She opened the cupboard where she kept the flour and sugar. She moved the flour bin aside and placed the phone at the very back, behind the baking soda and the cornstarch. Then she put the flower bin back. She walked back to the bathroom and put the carbon copy exactly where she'd found it. Under the Blue Tuesday tray. Folded the same way. She closed the drawer. Then she sat down at the kitchen table. Her notepad was in the drawer. She pulled it out and wrote, November 12th. Found carbon copy of quitclaim deed in bathroom drawer. Dated October 15th, 2023. Grantor, me. Grantee, Ellison Family Trust, managed by Hannah. Signature missing the loop. Photographed with an old phone. Phone hidden in flower bin. She underlined the last sentence twice. Then she tore off the page, folded it, and added it to the sugar canister. She made tea. She sat at the table. She stared out the window at the neighbor's maple tree. The leaves are gone now. The branches were bare. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat with the fact of it. Hannah returned an hour later. She knocked, then let herself in with the key Mary had given her years ago. Sorry I'm late, she said. She set a paper bag on the counter. I brought muffins. Thank you, Mary said. They sat at the table. Hannah asked about the cough. Mary said it was better. Hannah asked if she'd been taking her pills. Mary said yes. Hannah nodded and checked her phone. They ate muffins. They talked about the neighbor's dog. They talked about the weather. Hannah mentioned that her son had a basketball game next week and asked if Mary wanted to come. We'll see, Mary said. Hannah smiled. You should. You'd enjoy it. Mary nodded. She didn't mention the deed. She didn't mention the signature. She didn't mention the phone in the flower bin. She just drank her tea and listened to her daughter talk about things that didn't matter. After Hannah left, Mary sat at the table for a long time. She thought about the house. About the mortgage she and Tom had paid off. About the green folder in the filing cabinet. She thought about the carbon copy under the pill tray. About the witnesses she'd never met. About the notary she didn't remember seeing. She thought about the loop. Then she stood and walked to the filing cabinet. She opened the drawer and pulled out the green folder. She opened it and looked at the documents inside. The original mortgage. The payment history. The final payoff letter. At the back of the folder, she found a copy of the deed. The original deed from 1996, when she and Tom had bought the house. She looked at the signature line. Marian E. Ellison. The loop was there. Bold and clear. Mary closed the folder and put it back in the cabinet. Then she walked to the sugar canister and pulled out all the folded notes. She carried them to the table and spread them out. 14 notes. 14 small shifts. 14 pieces of a pattern. She sat down and read through them. Slowly. Carefully. Mail redirected. Router changed. Password withheld. Bank address changed. Receipt kept. Deed discovered. Signature forged. Mary folded the notes back up. She carried them to the bookshelf in the living room and pulled out an old Bible her mother had given her decades ago. She opened it to the Book of Psalms and tucked the notes inside. Then she put the Bible back on the shelf, third from the left, between a dictionary and a worn copy of Jane Eyre. She made more tea. She sat at the table. She opened the notepad and wrote one more line. November 12th. Pattern established. Evidence collected. Next step, confirmation. Then she closed the notepad and put it back in the drawer. The proof had arrived. Now she needed to know what to do with it. On November 18th, Mary drove to the county recorder's office. It was a plain brick building downtown, across from the library. She parked in the public lot and walked inside. The lobby was quiet. A few people sat in plastic chairs, waiting. A clerk sat behind a glass partition, sorting papers. Mary approached the window. Can I help you? The clerk asked. She was in her 50s, with short hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. I'd like to search for a recorded document, Mary said. The clerk handed her a number and pointed to a terminal in the corner. You can search the index over there. If you need copies, bring the document number back to the desk. Mary took the number and sat down at the terminal. The screen was old, the kind with a thick frame and a faint hum. She clicked through the menus until she found the search function. She typed her name, Marian E. Ellison. The results loaded slowly. There were several entries. Mortgage, dated April 1996. Refinance, dated June 2003. Satisfaction of mortgage, dated September 2014. And at the bottom, dated October 16, 2023, at 9:43 am. Quitclaim deed. Mary's chest tightened. She clicked on the entry. A scanned image appeared. She leaned closer. It was the same deed. Same date. Same names. Same missing loop in her signature. Same notary seal. She clicked to enlarge the image. The scan was clear. She could see every word. Every line. The witnesses' names, J. Morrison and D. Lane. The notary's signature, Daniel Lane. The notary's commission number, 427-931. The date stamp from the recorder's office, October 16, 2023, 9:43 a.m. Mary stared at the screen. She thought about the timeline. She'd been in the hospital on October 15th. The deed was dated October 15th. But it had been recorded on October 16th at 9:43 in the morning. That meant someone had brought it to the recorder's office the day after it was supposedly signed. Mary printed the page. Then she went back to the desk. "I'd like certified copies," she said. "Of which document?" Mary gave her the document number. The clerk typed it into her computer, then nodded. "That'll be $8 for the first page and $2 for each additional. 3 pages total. $12. Mary paid in cash. The clerk printed the copies, stamped them with a raised seal, and handed them over in a manila envelope. "Anything else?" "No. Thank you." Mary walked out of the building and sat in her car. She opened the envelope and looked at the certified copies. The seal was raised and official. The signature of the recorder was clear. The date and time were printed at the bottom of each page, October 16, 2023, 9:43 a.m. Mary put the copies back in the envelope. She started the car. On the drive home, she thought about where to keep them. Not in the filing cabinet. Not in a drawer. Somewhere Hannah wouldn't think to look. She parked in the driveway and carried the envelope inside. She walked to the bookshelf in the living room and pulled out the Bible. She opened it to the Book of Psalms and slid the envelope inside, next to the folded notes. Then she put the Bible back on the shelf. She made tea. She sat at the table. She opened the notepad and wrote, November 18th. Visited the county recorder's office. Deed confirmed. Recorded October 16th at 9:43 a.m. Certified copies obtained. Stored in the Bible. Then she circled the next task, find an attorney. She sat for a long time, staring at those 2 words. Find an attorney. It felt like crossing a line. Like acknowledging that this wasn't just paranoia or misunderstanding. This was real. This was theft. But Mary didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just sat with it. Then she picked up the phone and called Joan. "Can you come over?" Mary asked. "Now?" "Yes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Joan arrived with a grocery bag and a worried expression. "What's wrong?" Mary handed her the notepad. Joan read through it. Her face didn't change. She just read, slowly and carefully, until she reached the end. Then she looked at Mary. "You need a lawyer," Joan said. "I know. Do you have one?" "No." Joan pulled out her phone. "I'll find one." She searched for elder law attorneys in Madison. She found 4. She called the first one. Booked until mid-December. She called the second. Same answer. She called the third. No answer. She called the fourth. A receptionist answered. Joan explained that her sister needed a consultation about a property matter. The receptionist said the attorney had an opening the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. Joan took it. She gave Mary's name and number. She hung up and looked at Mary. Tuesday at 10. His name is Asha Patel. Mary nodded. Thank you. Joan stayed for another hour. They didn't talk much. Joan made soup. They ate. Then Joan left. Mary sat at the table and thought about Tuesday. About what she would say. About how to explain what had happened without sounding paranoid or confused. Then she opened the notepad and wrote, November 21st. Appointment with attorney Asha Patel. Tuesday, 10 a.m. She closed the notepad. She fed the cat. She turned off the lights. She went to bed. But she didn't sleep well. She kept waking, thinking about the deed. About the loop. About the house that was hers and the paper that said it wasn't. On November 28th, Mary drove to a small office building near the Capitol. The sign outside said Patel and Associates, Elder Law, Estate Planning, Probate. She parked and went inside. The waiting room was quiet. Beige walls, a few chairs, magazines on a low table. A receptionist sat behind a desk and asked her to sign in. Mary wrote her name and sat down. At exactly 10 a.m., a door opened and a man stepped out. He was in his early 50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a dark suit and carried a yellow legal pad. "Mrs. Ellison." Mary stood. "Yes, I'm Asha Patel. Please come in." She followed him into a small office. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a window with a view of the parking lot. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Mary Saturday." He sat down and opened the legal pad. "What can I help you with?" he asked. His voice was calm and measured. Mary set her purse on her lap and pulled out the manila envelope. Inside were the certified copies of the deed, a printed sheet from the hospital discharge summary, and her notepad. She set them on the desk. "I was in the intensive care unit in October," she said. "Pneumonia. Low oxygen. On October 15th, someone recorded a quitclaim deed transferring my house to a trust. I didn't sign it. Or if I did, I don't remember. And the signature doesn't look right." She opened the certified copy and pointed to the signature line. "I always make a loop in the R. That's not my loop." Patel leaned forward and studied the signature. Then he picked up the document and read it carefully. He turned to the second page. Then the third. His expression didn't change. He was just reading, absorbing, processing. After a few minutes, he set the document down and looked at Mary. "Who is Hannah Klein?" he asked. "My daughter." He nodded. He didn't look surprised. He picked up the discharge summary and read it. "What was your oxygen level on October 15th? Low 80s. Maybe mid-80s. He made a note on the legal pad. "Were you on any medications?" "Antibiotics. Oxygen. Something for anxiety, I think." "Do you remember signing this?" Mary shook her head. "No." "Do you remember anyone asking you to sign anything that day?" "No." Patel tapped his pen on the legal pad. "Do you remember seeing a notary?" "No." He looked at the document again. "It says here the notarization took place at the hospital." "That's unusual. Most notaries don't work in intensive care units. And most hospitals have policies against outside notarizations without administrative clearance." "I didn't see one," Mary said. "Did your daughter visit you that day?" "Yes." "Was she alone with you at any point?" Mary thought back. "My sister stepped out to talk to a nurse. For maybe 20 minutes. Patel made another note. He leaned back in his chair and looked at her. "Mrs. Ellison, I need to be direct with you. If this deed is valid, you no longer own your house. The property is now held in trust, managed by your daughter. If it's not valid, if you lacked capacity to sign, or if the notarization was improper, then we may be able to void it. But that requires evidence. Do you have anything else? Medical records? Visitor logs? Anything that shows who was in your room and when?" Mary pulled out her notepad and handed it to him. He read through it, page by page. Then he looked at her. "You've been documenting this?" "Yes." "Good. That's very good." Mary reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. She transferred the photos from the old phone to the drive the night before at the library. "I have photos of the carbon copy," she said. "And I have my discharge papers. And I can request my medical records from the hospital." She handed him the drive. Patel looked at it. Then he looked at her. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Mrs. Ellison, you've done exactly the right things. You've documented the irregularities. You've preserved evidence. You've sought legal counsel. That puts you in a strong position. What happens now?" Mary asked. Patel set the drive on the desk. "Here's what I recommend. First, we request your full medical record from the hospital, including clinician notes and visitor logs for October 14th and 15th. Second, we filed a petition to void the deed on the grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. Third, We record a lease pendants to cloud the title so the property can't be transferred or sold while the case is pending. Mary listened carefully. What's a lease pendants? It's a notice that there's a legal claim on the property. It gets recorded at the county recorder's office, and it alerts anyone who searches the title that there's a dispute. It prevents your daughter from selling or mortgaging the house until the court resolves the issue. How long does that take? A few months. Maybe longer. Courts move slowly. Mary nodded. What does this cost? My retainer is $2,500. That covers the initial work, requesting records, drafting the petition, recording the lease pendants. If we go to court, there may be additional fees. But I'll keep you informed every step of the way. Mary thought about it. She had the money. Not a lot, but enough. Her savings. Her IRA. She'd lived carefully for 10 years. She could afford this. I'll pay it, she said. Patel opened his desk drawer and pulled out a retainer agreement. He explained the terms. Mary read every line. Every word. Then she signed it. With the loop. Patel noticed. He smiled slightly. Good loop. Mary didn't smile back. I always make it. I believe you, he said. He stood and extended his hand. Mary shook it. His grip was firm but not aggressive. I'll get started right away, Patel said. I'll call the hospital records department today. I'll start drafting the petition this week. And I'll keep you updated on every development. Thank you, Mary said. She left the office and drove home. She didn't feel relieved. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt like she'd taken the first step on a long path. She sat at the kitchen table and opened the notepad. She wrote, November 28th. Met with attorney Asha Patel. Retainer paid. Plan. Request hospital records. File petition to void deed. Record lease pendants. Then she closed the notepad and made tea. The cat jumped onto the table and meowed. Mary scratched behind his ears. It's going to be okay, she said softly. The cat purred. Mary hoped she was right. On December 1st, Mary received a letter from Patel's office. It was brief and businesslike. He'd contacted the hospital records department. They'd received the request. The cost for a complete copy of her medical record, including visitor logs, was $43. She needed to send a check. Mary wrote the check that afternoon. She drove to the post office and mailed it. Then she went to the library and checked out 3 books about property law. She wanted to understand what she was dealing with. She wanted to know the language, the terminology, the process. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table and read. Most of the books were dense and technical, full of terms like grantor, grantee, consideration, quit, covenant, but slowly, piece by piece, Mary started to understand. A quitclaim deed transfers whatever interest the grantor has in a property to the grantee, without any warranties or guarantees. It's the simplest kind of deed, and the easiest to abuse. If someone forged a quitclaim deed, or coerced someone into signing one, or tricked someone who lacked capacity, the deed could be voided. But it required proof. Evidence. Documentation. Mary had that. She had her medical records. She had her notes. She had the photograph of the carbon copy. She had the signature with the missing loop. She just needed the official records to back it up. On December 8th, Mary went to her primary care doctor for a follow-up appointment. Dr. Singh was a woman in her mid-40s, calm and thorough. She'd been Mary's doctor for 12 years. How are you feeling? Dr. Singh asked. Much better. The cough is almost gone. Good. Let me listen to your lungs. Mary leaned forward. Dr. Singh pressed the stethoscope to Mary's back and listened. Take a deep breath. Good. Another. Good. She moved the stethoscope to different positions, listening carefully. Then she sat back. Your lungs sound clear. The pneumonia has been resolved. Thank you. Dr. Singh made a note in the chart. Then she looked at Mary. How are you doing otherwise? Emotionally? It can be hard, being that sick. Mary hesitated. Then she said, I need to ask you something. Of course. When I was in the hospital, in the ICU, do you think I would have been able to understand a legal document, like a deed? Dr. Singh frowned. When were you in the ICU? Mid-October. October 10th through October 22nd. Dr. Singh pulled up Mary's chart on the computer. She scrolled through the notes. Your oxygen saturation was in the low 80s on October 14th and 15th. You were on continuous oxygen. You were receiving antibiotics and a low-dose benzodiazepine for anxiety. Would I have been competent to sign something? Dr. Singh looked at her. Can I ask why you're asking? Mary met her eyes. Someone presented me with a deed while I was in the ICU. I don't remember signing it. And I'm trying to understand whether I could have signed it knowingly. Dr. Singh was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mary, hypoxia, low oxygen, can impair cognitive function. Confusion, disorientation, difficulty processing information. Combined with medication and the stress of being seriously ill, I would have serious concerns about someone's ability to make informed legal decisions in that state. Would you be willing to put that in writing? Dr. Singh looked at her steadily. If you need an affidavit for legal purposes, yes. I can state my medical opinion based on your chart. Thank you. Dr. Singh made another note. I'll prepare a letter. You can pick it up next week. Mary left the appointment feeling like she'd added another piece to the puzzle. Another layer of proof. On December 15th, a thick envelope arrived from the hospital records department. Mary opened it at the kitchen table. Inside were photocopies of her chart, admission notes, lab results, medication orders, nursing assessments, progress notes, discharge summary. And at the back, stapled separately, a visitor log. Mary's hands were steady as she unfolded the log. The dates ran from October 10th through October 22nd. Each entry listed the date, time, name of visitor, and relationship to the patient. She found October 15th. 9:15 a.m., Hannah Klein, daughter. 9:30 a.m., Joan Mercer, sister. 10:10 a.m., Joan Mercer, excited. 11:40 a.m., Hannah Klein, excited. Between 10:10 and 11:40, there were two other names. 10:20 a.m., J. Morrison, volunteer. 10:35 a.m., D. Lane, notary. Mary circled both names with a red pen. Then she pulled out the certified copy of the deed and looked at the witness signatures. J. Morrison. D. Lane. They were the same names. Mary picked up the phone and called Patel's office. The receptionist put her through. I have the visitor log, Mary said. Good. What does it show? Mary read him the names and times. Patel was quiet for a moment. So the notary and one of the witnesses were at the hospital on October 15th, during the window when your sister was out of the room and your daughter was alone with you. Yes. Did you see them? I don't remember. Did you speak to them? I don't remember. Patel made a note. Mary could hear the scratch of his pen through the phone. Okay, mail me a copy of that log. I'll add it to the file. This is good evidence, Mrs. Ellison. It establishes that these people were present at the hospital during the relevant time frame. What about the policy you mentioned? About notaries needing clearance. I'll follow up on that. I'll contact the hospital administration and ask whether there was any administrative clearance for a notary to perform services in the ICU on October 15th. Thank you. Mary hung up. She copied the visitor log on her printer. She put the original in the Bible with the other documents. She mailed the copy to Patel. Then she sat at the table and updated her notepad, December 15th. Hospital visitor log received. Morrison and Lane both present October 15th. Morrison at 10:20 a.m., M. Lane at 10:35 a.m., M. both during the window when Joan was out and Hannah was alone with me. Sent copy to Patel. She closed the notepad and stared out the window. The neighbor's maple tree was bare. Snow had started to fall. Small, light flakes that melted as soon as they hit the ground. Mary thought about the timeline. Joan had left around 10 a.m. The notary had arrived at 10:35. Hannah had texted someone on her dimmed phone. Someone who could arrange for witnesses. Someone who could come quickly. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. Mary sat with that realization. Then she stood and made tea. She fed the cat. She turned on the lamp beside the couch. She picked up one of the library books and read until her eyes grew heavy. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. Not because the problem was solved, but because she was no longer alone in it. She had an attorney. She had evidence. She had a plan. On December 19th, Patel called with an update. I spoke with the hospital administration. They confirmed that St. Bridget's has a policy requiring all outside notaries to check in with the administrative office before performing services on hospital property. They searched their records. There's no record of Daniel Lane checking in on October 15th. Mary's grip on the phone tightened. So he violated their policy. Yes, that doesn't necessarily make the notarization illegal, but it does make it irregular. Combined with your medical condition and your testimony that you don't remember signing, it strengthens our case. What's next? I'm drafting the petition. It'll be ready by the end of the week. I'll also draft an affidavit for you to sign, a sworn statement that you don't remember signing the deed, that you were on medication, that your oxygen levels were low. Can you come to my office on Friday to review and sign? Yes. And I'd like to get an affidavit from your sister as well, describing what she observed. Your condition, your tremor, the difficulty you had holding a pen. I'll ask her. Good. Once we have those affidavits, I'll file the petition with the court. And I'll record the lyrics at the same time. How long until there's a hearing? Hard to say. The court will set a date. Could be a few weeks. Could be a few months. Mary nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Okay. Mrs. Ellison, I want you to understand something. This is going to take time. And there will be moments when it feels like nothing is happening. But behind the scenes, the legal process is working. The lease pendens will cloud the title. Your daughter won't be able to sell or mortgage the property. The petition will put her on notice that you're challenging the deed. And eventually, we'll get in front of a judge. I understand. Good. I'll see you Friday. Mary hung up. She sat at the table and thought about what Patel had said. Time. Patience. Process. She could do that. She'd spent her whole life doing that. Working payroll. Balancing spreadsheets. Waiting for things to add up correctly. She could wait. On December 22nd, Mary went to Patel's office. He had the petition ready. It was 10 pages, typed and formatted, with numbered paragraphs and citations to statutes and case law. Mary read it carefully. The petition alleged that the quitclaim deed dated October 15, 2023, should be voided on the following grounds. 1. The grantor, Marion E. Ellison, lacked the mental capacity to execute a legal document on October 15, 2023, due to hypoxia, medication, and the stress of acute illness. 2. The grantor was subject to undue influence by her daughter, Hannah Klein, who had access to the grantor during a period of extreme vulnerability. 3. The notarization was irregular and did not comply with hospital policy, raising questions about the validity of the process. 4. The grantor has no memory of signing the deed and did not intend to transfer her property. The petition requested that the court void the deed, restore the property to Mary's sole ownership, and award costs and attorney fees. At the end were spaces for attachments: Mary's affidavit, Jones' affidavit, Dr. Singh's letter, the hospital discharge summary, the visitor log, and photographs of Mary's signature on other documents. Mary set the petition down and looked at Patel. "This is good," she said. "Thank you." She picked up the affidavit. It was 2 pages, single-spaced, formal language. Mary read every word. It stated that she was 58 years old, that she'd been hospitalized with pneumonia in October, that her oxygen saturation was low on October 15th, that she was on medication, that she had no memory of signing a deed, that the signature on the deed didn't look like her usual signature, and that she did not intend to transfer her property to anyone. Mary signed it at the bottom. She raised her right hand, and Patel administered the oath. "Do you swear that the contents of this affidavit are true to the best of your knowledge?" "I do." Patel notarized her signature. Then he added the affidavit to the petition. "I'll file this on Monday," he said. "And I'll record the lyrics at the same time." "What happens after that?" "Your daughter will receive notice. Probably from the title company, if she's tried to do anything with the property. Or from the court, once they serve her with the petition. She'll have a chance to respond. Then the court will set a hearing. Will I have to testify? Probably. But we'll prepare you. And I'll be there with you." Mary nodded. Okay. She left the office and drove home. She didn't feel scared. She didn't feel angry. She just felt focused. On December 26th, Patel called. The petition is filed. The lease pendens is recorded. Your daughter will be served with the petition within the next few days. Thank you. One more thing. I contacted the notary licensing board. I sent them a copy of the deed and a letter asking about the circumstances of the notarization. I also mentioned the hospital policy violation. They'll investigate and get back to me. How long will that take? A few weeks. Maybe a month. Okay. Mary hung up and sat at the table. She opened her notepad and wrote, December 26th. Petition filed. Lease pendens recorded. Notary board contacted. Hannah will be served soon. Then she closed the notepad and made tea. The cat jumped onto her lap. Mary stroked his fur. She thought about Hannah. About the phone call that would come. About the questions. About the anger. She thought about what she would say. Not much. Just enough. My attorney is handling it. That's all Hannah needed to hear. On December 27th at 2:15 in the afternoon, the phone rang. Mary picked it up. Hello. Mom, Hannah's voice was tight. Strained. I need to talk to you. Mary's heart didn't speed. Her hands didn't shake. She just picked up the pen beside the phone and wrote down the date and time. About what? Mary asked. I got a notice from a title company. Something about a cloud on the deed. Do you know anything about that? Yes. There was a pause. You filed something? Hannah's voice rose slightly. I did. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't tell me you transferred to my house. Silence. Then Hannah said, Mom, I did that to protect you. You were sick. I didn't know if you were going to make it. I needed to make sure everything was in order. Mary didn't raise her voice. I made it. I know. But. And I didn't sign that deed. You did. I was there. I don't remember it. You were awake. You held my hand. Mary looked at the notebook on the table. At the pages of notes she'd written. At the timeline she'd built. The signature isn't mine, Mary said. It is. The loop is missing. Hannah didn't reply. Mary waited. Then she said, My attorney is handling it. If you want to talk, call him. She gave Hannah the number. Then she hung up. She sat at the table and wrote in her notepad, December 27th, 2:15 p.m., Hannah called. Said she got notice of lease pendens. The claimed deed was for protection. Did not acknowledge signature discrepancy. Gave her Patel's number. Hung up. Then she closed the notepad and made tea. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated. She just felt like she'd said what needed to be said. The rest was out of her hands. Christmas came and went. Mary spent it with Joan. They exchanged small gifts. Mary gave Joan a book. Joan gave Mary a scarf. They cooked a simple meal. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. They watched a movie and went to bed early. Joan didn't ask about the deed, and Mary didn't bring it up. They just spent the day together, quietly, the way sisters do when words aren't necessary. On New Year's Eve, Mary sat at the kitchen table and looked at the calendar. 2024 was about to begin. She'd survived pneumonia. She'd discovered the deed. She'd hired an attorney. She'd filed a petition. She'd recorded a lease pendens. She'd done everything quietly. No shouting. No drama. Just paper and procedure. She thought about Hannah. About the hand that had held hers. About the folder on the windowsill. About the dimmed phone screen. About the notary who'd walked into an ICU and walked out with a signature that wasn't quite right. Mary didn't hate her daughter. She didn't even feel angry. She just felt clear. Clear about what had happened. Clear about what she needed to do. Clear about the fact that silence had been her best tool. On January 2nd, Patel called. The court has set a hearing for March 28th, he said. Mary wrote it down. What happens at the hearing? We'll present our case. I'll introduce the petition and the evidence. The judge will review everything. Your daughter's attorney, if she hires one, will have a chance to respond. Then the judge will make a determination. It might happen that day, or the judge might take it under advisement and issue a written order later. Will I have to testify? Probably. But it'll be straightforward. I'll ask you questions about your hospitalization, your memory of October 15th, your signature. Then the other side will have a chance to cross-examine you. Mary's chest tightened slightly. What will they ask? They'll try to establish that you were alert enough to sign, that you understood what you were doing, that the signature is yours. But we have your medical records. We have the visitor log. We have the signature analysis. We're in a strong position. Okay, there's one more thing. I heard back from the notary licensing board. Mary's grip on the phone tightened. What did they say? They investigated Daniel Lane. He claims he was at the hospital visiting a friend and that your daughter asked him to notarize a document. He says he confirmed your identity using your hospital wristband and that you appeared alert and able to understand what you were signing. Mary closed her eyes. That's not true. I know, but that's his version. The board also found that St. Bridget's Hospital has a policy requiring all outside notaries to check in with the administrative office before performing services on hospital property. Lane didn't check in. The board noted that as a policy violation, though not necessarily a legal one. However, they're keeping the file open pending the outcome of the court case. What does that mean? It means if the court voids the deed, the board may take disciplinary action against Lane. Suspension. Revocation of his commission. It depends on the findings. Good. Patel paused. Mrs. Ellison, I also contacted the other witness, J. Morrison. He works as a volunteer in the hospital chapel. I spoke with him on the phone. What did he say? He says he doesn't remember witnessing any signatures on October 15th. He says someone, he thinks it was a woman, asked him to sign something quickly, but he didn't read it closely. He thought it was a routine hospital form. He didn't realize it was a deed. Mary exhaled slowly. So he didn't know what he was signing. Correct. That helps us. Yes. It shows the witnesses didn't understand the nature of the document. Combined with your lack of memory and your medical condition, it strengthens our argument that the deed was executed improperly. Mary nodded to herself. Thank you. We're getting there, Patel said. Stay patient. After they hung up, Mary opened her notepad and wrote, January 2nd. Hearing set for March 28th. Notary board investigated Lane, claims he confirmed identity, but violated hospital policy. Morrison doesn't remember witnessing. Didn't know it was a deed. Then she closed the notepad and put it away. 2 more months until the hearing. 2 more months of waiting. Mary could do that. January and February passed slowly. Mary went about her days. She went to the library once a week. She read novels. She did crossword puzzles. She avoided Hannah's calls. Hannah called 4 times in January. Mary let them go to voicemail. The messages were always the same. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this. I was trying to help. Mary didn't call back. There was nothing to say. The court would decide. In February, Hannah stopped calling. But she sent a letter. It arrived on February 10th in a plain white envelope with Hannah's return address. Mary opened it at the kitchen table. The letter was handwritten, 2 pages on lined paper torn from a notebook. Dear Mom, I know you're angry with me. I understand. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. When you were in the hospital, I was scared. I didn't know if you were going to make it. And I thought, if something happens, if you don't come home, everything will be a mess. The house, the estate, all of it. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to make sure that if something happened, I could take care of things. I didn't think you'd be upset. I thought you'd understand. I'm sorry if I handled it wrong. I'm sorry if I should have asked you first. But you were so sick, Mom. You couldn't even hold a pen without shaking. I didn't think you were in a position to make decisions. Please call me. Please, let's talk about this. I don't want to fight. I just want you to be okay. Love, Hannah. Mary read the letter twice. Then she folded it and put it in the Bible with the other documents. She didn't respond. She didn't call. She just added a note to her notepad, February 10th. Received letter from Hannah. Claims she was protecting me. Apologizes, but doesn't acknowledge the deed was improper. Then she closed the notepad and went about her day. On February 14th, Patel called with another update. I've finalized the documents we'll present at the hearing. I have your affidavit, Jones' affidavit, Dr. Singh's letter, the hospital discharge summary, the visitor log, and the certified copies of the deed. I've also prepared a comparison of your signature on the deed versus your signature on other documents, your driver's license, bank records, checks. The loop is clearly missing on the deed. Good. I've also received a response from your daughter's attorney. Her name is Lisa Reeves. She filed an answer to the petition, denying the allegations. What does that mean? It means she's contesting the petition. She's arguing that you did sign the deed, that you had capacity, that the notarization was proper, and that the deed should stand. So we're going to trial. Not exactly. It's a hearing, not a trial. Less formal. But yes, both sides will present evidence, and the judge will make a decision. Mary's chest tightened. What if we lose? Then the deed stands. The property remains in the trust, managed by your daughter. And if we win, the deed is voided. The property is restored to you. Mary was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I understand. Mrs. Ellison, I believe we have a strong case. But I can't guarantee the outcome. The judge will weigh the evidence and make a determination based on the facts and the law. I know. Good. The hearing is 6 weeks away. Between now and then, don't sign anything. Don't talk to your daughter about the case. If she contacts you, refer her to me. I will. After they hung up, Mary sat at the table and thought about the hearing. About standing in front of a judge. About testifying. About Hannah sitting across the room, watching her. She thought about the house. About the oak floors and the maple tree outside. About Tom raking leaves. About the mortgage they'd paid off together. She thought about the green folder in the filing cabinet. Then she stood and walked to the cabinet. She opened the drawer and pulled out the folder. She looked at the original deed from 1996. The one she and Tom had signed together. Their signatures were side by side. Tom's was neat and small. Mary's was larger, with a clear loop in the R. Mary closed the folder and put it back in the cabinet. Then she made tea and sat at the window. The neighbor's maple tree was still bare, but the branches had tiny buds at the tips. Spring was coming. Mary sipped her tea and thought about time. About the way it moved forward, whether you wanted it to or not. About the way you couldn't stop it or slow it down. You could only move with it. One day at a time. One step at a time. That's what she was doing. Moving forward. One step at a time. March arrived with late snow. On March 10th, Patel sent Mary a packet of documents to review before the hearing. She read through them carefully. The petition. The affidavits. The medical records. The visitor log. The signature comparison. Everything was there. Everything was documented. On March 20th, 3 days before the hearing, Mary woke at 5 a.m. She couldn't sleep. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table. The house was dark and quiet. The cat was asleep on the couch. Mary thought about what she would say on the stand. Patel had prepared her. He'd asked her practice questions. He'd told her to answer clearly and concisely. To stick to the facts. To not speculate. Did you sign the deed? I don't remember signing it. Do you recognize the signature? It looks similar to mine, but the loop in the R is missing. I always make that loop. Were you on medication on October 15th? Yes. What was your oxygen level? Low 80s. Maybe mid-80s. Do you remember seeing a notary? No. Mary rehearsed the questions in her mind. She drank her tea. She watched the sky lighten outside the window. At 8 a.m., Joan called. How are you feeling? Joan asked. Nervous. That's normal. Do you want me to come with you to the hearing? No. You'll be there as a witness. Right. I'll see you there then. Okay. They hung up. Mary spent the day quietly. She didn't go anywhere. She didn't do anything. She just waited. On March 28th, Mary woke at 6 a.m. She showered. She dressed in a plain navy dress and low heels. She made tea but didn't eat. Her stomach felt tight. At 8:30, she drove to the county courthouse. It was a large stone building downtown with wide steps and tall columns. She parked in the public lot and walked inside. The lobby was busy. People in suits. People carrying briefcases. A sign listed the day's hearings by courtroom number. Mary found her case, Ellison versus Klein, courtroom 3C, 9 a.m. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Patel was waiting in the hallway. He was carrying his briefcase and a binder with labeled tabs. "Good morning, Mrs. Ellison." "Good morning. Ready?" "Yes." They walked to the courtroom. It was a small room with wood paneling and fluorescent lights. A few rows of benches. A judge's bench at the front. A court reporter at a desk beside it. Hannah was already there. She sat in the front row with a woman in a dark suit. Her attorney, Mary, assumed. Hannah looked at her mother. Mary looked back. Neither of them smiled. Joan sat in the second row. She gave Mary a small nod. The judge entered at 9 a.m. Everyone stood. The judge was a woman in her early 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses. She sat. Everyone Saturday. The judge opened the file and read silently for a few minutes. Then she looked up. "This is a petition to void a quitclaim deed on the grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. Mr. Patel, you're representing the petitioner." Patel stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Ms. Reeves, you're representing the respondent." Hannah's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Patel, proceed." Patel walked to the front and opened his binder. He spoke calmly, methodically, walking the judge through the timeline. Mary's hospitalization. Her pneumonia. Her oxygen levels, 82 to 86% on October 14th and 15th. The medications she was on, antibiotics, supplemental oxygen, and a low-dose benzodiazepine for anxiety. The visitor log shows that Hannah was alone with Mary between 10:10 and 11:40 on October 15th. The arrival of the notary, Daniel Lane, at 10:35. The arrival of the witness, J. Morrison, at 10:20. The deed itself, dated October 15th, recorded October 16th at 9:43 a.m. The signature anomaly, the missing loop in the R of Ellison. Mary's testimony that she had no memory of signing the deed. The hospital policy requires notaries to check in with administration. The fact that Lane did not check in. Morrison's statement that he didn't remember signing and thought it was a routine form. Dr. Singh's letter stating that hypoxia and medication can impair cognitive function and decision-making capacity. Patel presented the medical records, the affidavits, the photographs, the certified copy of the deed, the signature comparison showing Mary's loop on other documents. He spoke for 20 minutes. The judge listened. She made notes. She asked 3 questions. What was the petitioner's oxygen saturation on October 15th? Patel checked the medical record. Between 82 and 86%, according to the nursing notes. What medications was she receiving? Intravenous antibiotics, supplemental oxygen at 4 liters per minute, and lorazepam 0.5 milligrams as needed for anxiety. She received 1 dose of lorazepam at 8 a.m. on October 15th. Did the petitioner have a durable power of attorney in place at the time? Yes, Your Honor. Her daughter, Hannah Klein, was named as her agent under a power of attorney executed in 2015. However, that power of attorney specifically did not authorize the transfer of real property. The power was limited to financial transactions, bill paying, and medical decisions. The judge nodded. She made another note. Then she looked at Ms. Reeves. Your response. Ms. Reeves stood. She was in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun. She wore a gray suit and carried a folder. She argued that Mary had signed the deed voluntarily, that the notary, Daniel Lane, had confirmed Mary's identity and capacity, that the deed was properly executed and recorded, that Mary's claim of not remembering was not sufficient to void a legal document. People forget things, Your Honor, especially after a serious illness. But that doesn't mean the document is invalid. Mr. Lane attests that Mrs. Ellison was alert and responsive, that she nodded when he asked if she understood what she was signing, that she held the pen and signed the document herself. Ms. Reeves presented Lane's affidavit, which Mary hadn't seen before. In it, Lane stated that he was at the hospital on October 15th visiting a friend. Hannah Klein approached him in the hallway and asked if he could notarize a document. He went to Mary's room, confirmed her identity using her hospital wristband, explained that the document was a quitclaim deed transferring property to a trust, and asked if she understood and agreed. Mary nodded. That she held the pen and signed the document. that 2 witnesses were present, that the notarization was proper. Mary's chest tightened as she listened. She didn't remember any of that. She didn't remember Lane. She didn't remember nodding. She didn't remember holding the pen. She wanted to stand up and shout, "That's not true." But she didn't. She sat still. She waited. She let Patel handle it. The judge listened to Ms. Reeves. She made more notes. Then she set the folder down. "I'm going to hear testimony from the petitioner," the judge said. "Mrs. Ellison, please approach the stand." Mary stood. Her legs felt weak. She walked to the front and sat in the witness box. A clerk approached and asked her to raise her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Patel stood and walked toward her. "Mrs. Ellison, can you state your name for the record?" "Marian Elizabeth Ellison." "And where do you live?" 742 East Mifflin Street, Madison, Wisconsin. "How long have you lived there?" 27 years. "Did you purchase the property with your late husband?" "Yes." "When was the mortgage paid off?" "September 2014. "After the mortgage was paid off, who owned the property?" "My husband and I. Then, after he died, just me." Patel nodded. "Mrs. Ellison, in October 2023, you were hospitalized. Can you tell the court why?" "I had pneumonia." "How long were you in the hospital?" 12 days. October 10th through October 22nd. "Were you in the intensive care unit?" "Yes." "For most of it." "On October 15th, do you remember anyone asking you to sign a legal document?" "No." "Do you remember seeing a notary?" "No." "Do you remember signing a quitclaim deed?" "No." Patel held up the certified copy of the deed. "This is a quitclaim deed dated October 15th, 2023. It transfers your property to a trust managed by your daughter. Do you remember signing this?" Mary looked at it. "No." "Do you recognize this signature?" Mary looked at the signature line. "It looks similar to mine. But the loop in the R is missing. Do you always make a loop in the R when you sign your name?" "Yes." "Always." Patel held up photographs of Mary's signature on her driver's license, bank statements, and checks. "Are these your signatures?" "Yes." "Do they all have the loop?" "Yes." "Mrs. Ellison, on October 15th, were you on medication?" "Yes." "Antibiotics?" "Oxygen?" "Something for anxiety?" "Do you remember your oxygen levels that day?" "They were low. In the 80s. "Were you able to hold a pen without shaking?" "No. My hands were shaking. I had to use both hands to hold a pen." Patel nodded. "No further questions, Your Honor." Ms. Reeves stood. "Mrs. Ellison, you testified that you don't remember signing the deed. But is it possible that you signed it and simply forgot?" Mary looked at her. "I don't remember signing it. But you were on medication. You were ill. Isn't it possible that your memory is impaired?" "I don't remember signing it. Mr. Lane attests that you were alert and responsive, that you nodded when he asked if you understood what you were signing. Do you remember nodding?" "No." "Do you remember Mr. Lane at all?" "No." "But if you don't remember, how can you be sure you didn't sign it?" Mary's chest tightened. She looked at the judge. Then she looked back at Ms. Reeves. "I can't be sure," Mary said. "But I know my signature. And that's not my loop." Ms. Reeves paused. Then she said, "No further questions." Mary stepped down. She returned to her seat beside Patel. Her hands were shaking slightly. Patel leaned over and whispered, "You did great." The judge called Joan to the stand. Joan testified about visiting Mary in the hospital, about the tremor in Mary's hands, about the way Mary had struggled to hold a pen to sign a routine lab consent form. She had to use both hands, Joan said. And even then, the signature was shaky. The judge asked a few questions. Then Joan stepped down. The judge closed the file and looked at both attorneys. "I'm going to take this under advisement. I'll review the evidence and issue a written order within 30 days. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting any transfer, sale, or encumbrance of the property." She stood. Everyone stood. The judge left. Mary exhaled. Patel turned to her. "That went well. How do you know?" "She granted the temporary restraint. That means she sees merit in our case." Mary nodded. She glanced at Hannah. Hannah was talking to her attorney. She didn't look at her mother. Mary left the courtroom and drove home. She sat at the kitchen table and opened her notepad. She wrote, March 28th. Hearing held. Testified. Joan testified. Temporary restraining order granted. Final order pending within 30 days. Then she closed the notepad and fed the cat. The 30 days felt long. Mary went about her days. She didn't call Hannah. She didn't expect Hannah to call her. She went to the library. She read novels. She worked in the garden, preparing the beds for spring planting. On April 15th, Patel called. I haven't heard from the court yet. It's not unusual for it to take longer than 30 days. Sometimes judges are behind schedule. Okay, just wanted to keep you updated. Thank you. On April 23rd, a letter arrived from the court. Mary opened it carefully. Inside was a 3-page order signed by the judge. She sat at the kitchen table and read it slowly. The court found that Marian E. Ellison lacked the requisite mental capacity to execute a quitclaim deed on October 15, 2023, due to hypoxia, medication, and the stress of acute illness. The court further found that the notarization was irregular and did not comply with hospital policy, raising questions about the validity of the process. The court also noted the testimony of witness J. Morrison, who did not recall signing the document and did not understand its nature at the time. The court also noted the signature anomaly, the missing loop in the grantor's signature, which was inconsistent with her signatures on other documents. Based on the preponderance of the evidence, the court concluded that the quitclaim deed dated October 15, 2023, was executed without the informed consent of the grantor and was therefore void and of no legal effect. The court ordered that the property located at 742 East Mifflin Street, Madison, Wisconsin, was restored to the sole ownership of Marian E. Ellison. The court further ordered that the lease pendens recorded on December 26, 2023, was lifted. The court further ordered that the Ellison Family Trust had no claim to the property. The court awarded costs and reasonable attorney fees to the petitioner to be paid by the respondent. Mary set the letter down. She sat very still. She read it again, more slowly, to make sure she understood. The deed was void. The house was hers again. She picked up the phone and called Patel. I got the order, she said. Good. It's over. What happens now? I'll file a certified copy with the recorder's office to clear the title. I'll also send notice to your financial institutions. The house is yours again, Mrs. Ellison. Mary nodded to herself. Thank you. You're welcome. You did the hard part. You kept records. You stayed calm. That's what won this. After they hung up, Mary sat at the table for a long time. She looked around her kitchen. The cat was asleep on the windowsill. The kettle was on the stove. The light through the window was soft and warm. She pulled out her notepad and wrote, April 23rd. Court order received. Deed voided. Title restored. The house is mine. Then she drew a line under it. Not because the story was over, but because this chapter was. On May 5th, Mary met Hannah at a coffee shop downtown. Hannah had called and asked if they could talk. Mary agreed. But not at home. Not where the lockbox lived or the notepad sat or the sugar canister held its secrets. Neutral ground. They sat at a small table by the window. Mary ordered tea. Hannah ordered coffee. They didn't speak until the drinks arrived. Hannah wrapped her hands around her cup. I'm sorry. Mary looked at her. For what? For everything. Be specific. Hannah looked down. For the deed. For not telling you. For thinking I knew better. Mary sipped her tea. Why did you do it? Hannah's eyes filled. I was scared. You were so sick. I didn't know if you were going to make it. And I thought if something happened, if you didn't have things in order, it would be a mess. The house, the estate, everything. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From complications. From delays. From having a say? Hannah's jaw tightened. That's not fair. You signed my name. Or had someone sign it. On a deed I never agreed to. While I was on oxygen and medication. That's not protection. That's theft. Hannah flinched. I didn't steal anything. You tried. Silence. Hannah wiped her eyes. I didn't think you'd find out. Mary set her cup down. I know. How did you? I pay attention. Hannah looked at her mother. Really looked at her. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. Hannah nodded slowly. I know. And I'm sorry. I really am. Mary didn't respond. She just looked at her daughter and saw the little girl who used to hold her hand before school concerts. She saw the teenager who'd stayed up late studying at the kitchen table. She saw the woman who'd brought soup and muffins and organized pill trays in color-coded boxes. She saw all of it. And none of it changed what had happened. I don't think we can go back, Mary said. Hannah's face crumpled. Mom, I'm not saying we can't move forward, but it won't be the same. I understand. Mary stood. I have to go. Hannah stood too. Can I call you? Yes. Will you answer? Sometimes. Mary left the coffee shop and drove home. She didn't cry. She didn't feel relieved. She just felt like she'd said what needed to be said. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table and thought about what came next. She needed a new will. She needed new safeguards. She needed to make sure this could never happen again. On May 12th, Mary met with a new attorney, not Patel, who handled litigation, but someone who specialized in estate planning. The attorney's name was Margaret Fry. She was in her late 40s, calm and precise. Mary sat in her office and explained what she wanted. The house would go to Joan first. If Joan predeceased her, it would go to a local charity she'd supported for years. Not to Hannah. Not to a trust managed by anyone in the family. Are you sure? Margaret asked. Yes. This is a significant change. I know. Margaret made notes. I'll also recommend a co-executor. Someone neutral. Not a family member. Someone who can ensure your wishes are carried out exactly as you specify. Good. Margaret drafted the will. Mary reviewed it line by line. Then she signed it. Not at home. Not in a place where someone could question whether she'd been clear-headed. She signed it at Margaret's office with 2 witnesses present, a paralegal and a notary who had no connection to her family. She raised her right hand and swore that she was of sound mind and that this was her will. The notary stamped the signature. The witnesses signed their names. Mary walked out with a certified copy in a blue folder. She drove home and put the folder in a new lockbox she'd purchased. She put the lockbox in the cabinet under the sink, next to the old one that held the evidence from the case. That evening, she made tea and sat at the window. The light was golden and warm. The cat was asleep on the couch. The notepad was in the drawer. Everything was in order. Summer arrived slowly. By June, the neighbor's maple tree was full and green. Mary planted tomatoes in the backyard. She set up a small table on the patio and sat outside in the evenings with a book and a cup of tea. Hannah called once a week. The conversations were short. They talked about the weather, about the kids, about work. They didn't talk about the deed. They didn't talk about the court order. They didn't talk about what had been lost. On July 12th, Hannah came over for lunch. She brought a pie. Mary made sandwiches. They ate on the patio. The cat sat between them, watching a bird in the tree. This is nice, Hannah said. Yes. I miss this. Mary looked at her. It's still here. Hannah nodded. She didn't ask what Mary meant. She just ate her sandwich and watched the tree. After lunch, Mary walked Hannah to the door. Hannah paused. Are we okay? She asked. Mary thought about it. We're something. Hannah smiled slightly. That's a start. Yes. After Hannah left, Mary went back to the kitchen and washed the dishes. Then she sat at the table and opened her notepad. She hadn't written in it for weeks. She flipped through the pages. All the dates. All the time. All the quiet observations that had built a case. She turned to a fresh page and wrote, July 12th. Lunch with Hannah. Careful words. Small steps. Then she closed the notepad and put it back in the drawer. On August 10th, Mary finalized her estate plan. She updated her medical directives with the hospital, clear, signed, witnessed at a bank desk on a bright Tuesday with Joan on her right and a banker who spelled her name twice. Everything was documented. Everything was witnessed. Everything was in order. On September 1st, Mary went to the county recorder's office one more time. She searched the index under her name. There were no new entries. Just the old ones. Mortgage. Refinance. Discharge. And the voided quitclaim, marked with a note in red, "See court order void." Mary printed a copy of the entry and took it home. She put it in the lockbox with the other documents. That evening, Joan came over for dinner. They made spaghetti and garlic bread. They talked about the library where Joan worked, about a new book club she'd joined, about the cold snap predicted for the weekend. Mary didn't mention the anniversary. Joan didn't ask. They just ate and talked and washed dishes together. After Joan left, Mary sat on the couch with the cat and a book. But she didn't read. She just sat in the quiet of her house. Her house. The place she'd fought for without raising her voice. The place she'd kept by keeping records. She thought about Hannah. About the hand that had held hers. About the possibility of forgiveness, which felt distant but not impossible. She thought about the loop in the R. About the signature that wasn't quite right. About the small details that had saved her. She thought about the hours in the ICU, the folder on the windowsill, the dimmed phone, the chaplain's words about 2 witnesses. She thought about how easily it could have gone the other way. How easily she could have lost everything. But she hadn't. Because she'd noticed. Because she'd waited. Because she'd written things down. Mary set the book aside and walked to the kitchen. She opened the drawer and pulled out the notepad. She turned to the last page where she'd written anything. July 12th. Lunch with Hannah. Careful words. Small steps. Below it, she wrote, September 1st. 1 year since discovery. The house is still mine. Records kept. Lesson learned. Life continues. Then she drew a small line under it. Not an ending. Just a mark. A place to pause. She closed the notepad and put it back in the drawer. Then she turned off the lights, checked the locks, and went to bed. The house was quiet. The cat was asleep. The calendar was marked for next year. And in the lockbox under the sink, the folders waited. Labeled. Organized. Complete. Just in case. By autumn, Mary had settled into a new rhythm. She'd set a reminder to review her will and estate documents once a year on the anniversary of the court order. She'd check the county recorder's office once a year, just to make sure nothing had changed. She'd keep copies of everything in the lockbox. Not because she was paranoid, but because she'd learned that vigilance isn't paranoia. Vigilance is preparation. On October 15, 2024, exactly 1 year after the deed had been signed, Mary stood at the kitchen sink and looked out the window. The neighbor's maple tree was turning red again. Not the bright red of peak season, but the early, subtle red that comes before the full blaze. She thought about Tom. About the leaves he used to rake. About the way he'd point to the tree and say, "That's the one. Right there. That's the best red in the whole block." She missed him. She missed the simplicity of those days. But she didn't regret the path she'd taken. The path that had started in an ICU with a hand that held hers and a hand that signed a deed. She'd survived pneumonia. She'd survived betrayal. She'd survived the quiet violence of someone thinking they could speak for her, sign for her, decide for her. And she'd done it without shouting. Without spectacle. Without burning bridges. She'd done it with paper and patience and a loop in the letter R. Mary turned off the water. The kettle was on the stove. She filled it and set it to boil. The cat jumped onto the counter and meowed. Mary scratched behind his ears. "We're okay," she said softly. The cat purred. The kettle clicked off. Mary poured the water into a mug. She added a tea bag and watched the water darken. She carried the mug to the table and sat down. Then she reached for the cabinet door under the sink where the lockbox lived. She didn't open it. She just rested her hand on the door for a moment, feeling the weight of what was inside. The proof. The record. The story. Then she pulled her hand back and picked up her tea. She didn't need to open the box. She didn't need to read the files. She knew what they said. She knew what she'd done. She knew who she was. That was enough. November arrived cold and gray. On November 5th, 2024, exactly 1 year after she'd first noticed the shift, Mary sat at the kitchen table with a blank calendar for 2025. She wrote in the important dates. Joan's birthday. Doctor appointments. The day she'd review her will and records. She'd learned to mark time differently now. Not just by holidays and birthdays, but by anniversaries of small victories. The day the court order came. The day the title was restored. The day she'd stood in her kitchen and realized she was safe. On November 12th, the day she'd found the carbon copy under the pill tray, Mary made tea and sat at the window. 2 years since that discovery. 2 years since she'd photographed the deed and hidden the phone in the flower bin. She thought about how much had changed. And how much had stayed the same. The house was still hers. The cat was still asleep on the windowsill. The maple tree was still standing outside. But she was different. Harder in some ways. Softer in others. Be more careful. More aware. More herself. December came. The holidays have arrived again. Mary decorated a small tree. She baked cookies. She sent cards to a few old friends. Joan invited her to Christmas dinner. Mary accepted. Hannah called on Christmas Eve. Can I stop by tomorrow? Just for a little while. Mary thought about it. Okay. I'll bring the pie. I'll bring the plates. They hung up. On Christmas Day, Hannah came over at noon. She carried a pumpkin pie and a small wrapped box. Mary let her in. They sat at the kitchen table. They didn't hug. They just Saturday. Hannah set the box on the table. I got you something. Mary looked at it. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Mary opened the box. Inside was a keychain with a small silver charm in the shape of a house. Engraved on the back were the words, "Always yours." Mary held it in her hand. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she looked at Hannah. Thank you. Hannah's eyes were damp. I mean it. Mary set the keychain on the table. I know. They ate pie. They talked about Hannah's kids, about basketball games and school projects and birthday parties. They talked about work. They talked about the snow predicted for New Year's Eve. They didn't talk about the deed. They didn't talk about the court order. They didn't talk about what had almost happened. But the keychain sat on the table between them. A small acknowledgement. A small apology. A small step. After Hannah left, Mary picked up the keychain. She looked at the engraving. Always yours. She thought about those words. About what they meant. About what they didn't mean. Then she put the keychain on her key ring, next to her house key. Not because she trusted Hannah again. Not fully. But because she believed in the possibility of repair. Slow repair. Careful repair. The kind of repair that takes years. Mary washed the pie plates. She fed the cat. She turned on the Christmas tree lights and sat in the living room, looking at the small blinking bulbs. She thought about the year that had passed. The court order. The new will. The careful conversations with Hannah. The Sunday lunches that were slowly becoming routine again. She thought about the woman she'd been before the machines. The woman who'd trusted without testing. The woman who'd assumed love without documentation. She wasn't that woman anymore. But she wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was just careful. And that, she decided, was enough. January 2025 arrived cold and clear. On the 1st, Mary sat at the kitchen table and wrote in her notepad. Not a list. Not a date. Just a sentence. I kept my house. I kept my records. I kept to myself. She read it over. Then she closed the notepad and put it back in the drawer. That evening, the first frost came. Mary stood at the sink and cracked the window open just an inch. The air was sharp and clean. She could hear the wind moving through the bare branches of the maple tree. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator. She could hear the cat's soft breathing on the couch. The kettle was on the stove. She turned it on. While the water heated, she walked to the cabinet under the sink. She knelt down and pulled out the lockbox. She unlocked it and looked inside. 3 folders now. 1 manila, labeled Deed Evidence, 1 blue, labeled Will 2024, and 1 green, the original mortgage folder, which she'd added to the box for safekeeping. She didn't pull them out. She didn't read them. She just looked at them for a moment. Proof of where she'd been. Proof of where she was going. Proof that she'd survived. Then she closed the box, locked it, and put it back under the sink. The kettle clicked off. Mary stood and poured the water into a mug. She added a tea bag. She carried the mug to the table and sat down. The window was still cracked. The air was still cold. The house breathed around her. She touched the cabinet door one last time. Just a light touch. Just enough to say, "I see you. I remember. I'm ready." Then she picked up her tea and drank. Outside, the maple tree stood bare in the streetlight. The branches moved slightly in the wind. The frost gathered on the sill. Inside, the house was warm. The cat stirred and resettled. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Mary closed the window. She finished her tea. She rinsed the mug and set it in the dish rack. Then she turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. The lockbox stayed under the sink. The notepad stayed in the drawer. The keychain stayed on the key ring. And the house, the small two-bedroom on the east side, with oak floors and a maple tree outside, stayed hers. Always hers. Not because someone said so. Not because a piece of paper declared it. But because she had fought for it quietly, steadily, without spectacle or rage. She had kept her records. She had told the truth. She had let the law do what it was designed to do. And now, more than a year later, she sat in her home and knew this is what justice looks like. Not a parade. Not a triumph. Just a woman, a cat, a kettle, and a cabinet door that holds the proof. This is what safety looks like. Not the absence of threat, but the presence of preparation. This is what peace looks like. Not forgetting, but moving forward. Mary pulled the covers up to her chin. The room was dark and quiet. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she will wake up. She would make tea. She would check the mail. She would water the houseplants. She would call Joan. She would live her life. And the house would still be hers. That was enough. That was everything. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.